Hello, good morning, and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and disembodied hands, Quindy, Justin, and sometimes even John. How are you all today? Happy Groundhog Day. Did everybody forget that it was Groundhog Day? Snow Day. Snow Groundhog Day. I guess the groundhog's probably going to stay buried where you are then, Arrow is. Ah, dear. Let's go to Ogre. Go to Ogre while we chat. And I'm going to mix up my reds and think about my browns a bit. Yes, it's 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And an O in there somewhere. But if you just, write it in shorthand, then it's all twos. Yes, even more twos on the 22nd. Yes, many twos. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Seeing a lot of hellos. Seeing some names that I don't know. Hello, hello. If you are a new people. Welcome. Here we are going to paint some things. Probably some red today. I'm probably also gonna. I think I'm gonna add those little ties there on his arm. I think are also gonna be red. I'm looking to repeat since red is gonna be my primary color as far as bright color, other than his skin. I'm going to look to repeat that wherever I can. There we are. Get him in focus for the level I'm going to work at. And let me grab my reds. We're using, of course, Asmodeus, my favorite. Pathfinder red. Pathfinder MSP. It's a beautiful, beautiful red, warm red brick color. Oh, a Tuesday. Oh, geez. I spent time out of my morning schedule to help you this morning, D. Clearman, and you reward me with that? Oh, man, all bets are off now. All right, here we go. So let's start with mixing up our highlights and shadows here. I'm going to actually do... Where did my orange brown go? Orange brown? That's burnt orange. That is not what I want. Orange brown. Yeah, exactly, Quindy. So Groundhog Day is notorious for kicking my butt in past years. So hopefully if I hide here at home, I can avoid having my butt kicked by Groundhog Day. That's my hope anyway. It's my great hope. I have this blonde hair sitting out, so I think I am going to use it as a bit of a highlight. We've got our colors coming up here. 4 drops of Asmodeus, 2 and 2 drops of Asmodeus and orange brown, because I really like the kind of rusty color it gives me. Then I'm going straight orange brown, but I need some white in that to bring it a little bit lighter. It's not really a light thing. Yes, I'm sorry about that, Princess Trunk. That actually happened. That was my Groundhog Day several years ago, too. That's why I mentioned that it has kicked my butt in the past. My grandmother's funeral was actually on a Groundhog Day. And it was the first death in my family, like my immediate family. So it's a hard one. Oh, geez. Yeah, I would boo you too. Yeah, I don't know what it is about Groundhog Day, but I've had several, just really kind of life butt-kicking things happen on Groundhog Day. There were 3 years in a row one time, and that's when I noticed it. It was when I had 3 terrible Groundhog Days in a row. And I was like, what is going on here, universe? All right, so that blonde hair warmed up our orange a bit. I did take a big brush full of this and mix it into this. Now we have a very nice kind of brick red triad going on, which is nice. We can use that to highlight our stuff. Last year wasn't terrible. I mean, there are terrible ones. That, like I said, there have been several terrible Groundhog Days. But I think my attitude has improved in general, however, because I flipped the script this year, and instead of thinking of that the Groundhog Days of the past have been terrible, I told myself, well, if that Groundhog Day hadn't happened, you would still be working a corporate job. So there we go. I might have never gotten off my butt and gone to work for Reaper without that Groundhog Day. It's a terrible Groundhog Day, but still, there's always something. Changes are not always just negative. Although our human brains tend to really hate change. But yeah, most of my really bad Groundhog Days happened a long time ago. If it's your friend's birthday on Groundhog Day, they probably get a good Groundhog Day. But I will always be suspicious of the motives of Groundhog Day because of past experience. I'm going to mix up one more highlight here, taking some orange brown, adding in some bleached linen, and going to add in another drop of that blonde hair color, which is has a lot of white in it. You can see it there. Yellows are always good to highlight oranges and reds with. So this is just like a very muted yellow, but it still works. That's a good attitude to have, Bug King. If you can look for the good, even when you're like, very unhappy, then it may not be always true, but it's at least a improvement in your mindset and will make you feel a little better. Alrighty, so let's see here. I have my reds, and I think I want to work on the leather up here and make it kind of weathered like we did here. So on his armband, we brought in some weathering to make it look worn. So let's work on our red up top and see what we can do with that. I may need to take it a little more yellow on the edges, a yellowy leather. Hello, David Weir. Wow, you are stuck on the caps. You looked extremely exuberant. It's okay, you can be extremely exuberant. I do not always assume that all caps is yelling. Sometimes I just assume you're going yay with a super happy face. So I find that a more, a better attitude to have toward people who are stuck on caps. Unless they're being obnoxious, then it's then my tolerance level abruptly disappears. But you're never obnoxious. There we go. So essentially I'm going to start, and it's going to take a little bit to bring it up, but you can kind of see the lighter edge I'm putting on this red. If you want to work reds up from a very dark color as this red is to something that, that looks much more vibrant and intense, this would be kind of like the same technique I'd use on red velvet, except I would be bringing it up with a different color palette. But keep your darks and just start slowly working up your lights. I'm using a stippling stroke here, which means I'm going dot, 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 because I want the edges of this leather to look kind of chewed up and splitting. Curnico. Yes, it's just, there we go. Enthusiasm. That's right. Good. Very good. Wow, it is windy out today. It was windy yesterday. I did a photo shoot. I finally have a professional photo of myself that is not involving miniatures and not at Reaper. But it was windy. I would have needed much more hairspray than I had in order to weather that day. Pun intended. But I did turn out with at least a couple of decent photos of myself, which is something that I wanted. I have never had a professional photo taken of me before, so it was an experience. My photographer was very French. Well, yeah, if you're sick, you should take a sick day. This whole, quandary Americans have about, I'm sick, should I go to work? The answer should just be no. I mean, and I'm somebody with a mighty, mighty immune system, so my coworkers, try as they might, cannot make me ill, or could not make me ill, but there are always people weaker than you around. So you can see those little dots coming up there on the edge. Now, if you if you use too bright of an orange here and too bright of a red, you can come up with something that looks like it's kind of got embers or burning embers along the edges. So I'll want to mute that orange out if I want it to really look like leather and not be like it's on fire. Oh no, choppy stream? My end is looking green, actually. Hold on, let me run it. I will attempt to ascertain whether part of it is on my end. 1 second, guys. But my OBS says we're pretty okay, so let me look. I know a lot of you have had very inclement weather, so that could be part of it. Judging my internet. Silently judging my... Not so silently judging my internet. Yeah, this might be a little bit too orange. I might get, might end up being just a bit too much. So, oh yeah, my upload's okay. Like, we're right around 30. It wobbles a little. Yeah, now I'm up at 38. Okay, so it wobbles a little bit between like 23 and 40. But it's pegged at 40 now. It's looking pretty good. So it looks like my end is good. I made soup last night. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my upload is good. So at least for once, it's not me. But yeah. Pardon me. I'm going to take my tomato color. Oh, that's what I'm going to call it. This is my tomato color. I decided this is too orange. I don't want flaming ogre club. I'm sure he would not mind it, but I don't want it. So let me grab my base so you guys can see the colors here a little bit easier. And I'm going to grab that tomato color and I'm going to bring it up into another well, which I do all the time if I want to... And this is the advantage, by the way, of building big paint puddles in this well, is that you have plenty of paint to pull over to a new well if you want to start over. I'm going to grab a little bit of my lightest orange here. And I am going to add it because I do want to warm up that color a little bit. But then I'm going to add an off-white. This is going to pink it out a little bit. Although I could go, let's actually do blonde hair. It has a lot of white in it, but it also has yellow. What I don't want is I think that the orange brown is a little bit too bright. Too saturated. And I want a more dull color, a more washed out color. Yeah, that'll work. That'll work. And if it gets too pink, that's easy. We can always just glaze the orange over it or a yellow at the end and it will stop being that. But this should let me get to where I want to be. Ah, okay. So we are seeing a little wobbles. Okay. Little wobbles. You can vary them if you want, Bull. We actually did that a while ago. I mean, Noli has 2 different colors of leather. He has the light leather of his bandolier and the darker leather of his pouch. Be aware that in general, there are just a few ways to go with leather, and if you just like throw a bunch of different colored leather on a model just to do it, you could get in trouble color-wise, because 2 of your choices there are yellowy leather, which is like the Knowles bandolier, and reddish leather. And those are going to read as like a yellowy or an orangey or a red. And so your color scheme on your model should impact the color of your leather if you don't want things to clash. There's no reason like to just throw a whole bunch of leather colors on a model unless it makes sense. A lot of leather is just going to be a dark brown or a dark reddish brown or that kind of tan color. So I usually go predominantly with one. And then if I'm going to switch it up, I'll just go between those 2. For example, here we've got little leather straps that I went much more with a lighter, more yellow leather. And then we've got his belt, which is definitely a more dark, cracked leather. So... And then we actually do have I'm painting these as if they're red leather and that as red leather. So I've got 3 colors of leather here and one of them is actually a dyed leather. So it's actually a solid color instead of any natural color. So I mean, remember that even leather is a color, essentially. And so when you put it on a model, you gotta factor it into your color scheme. And if you don't want to do that, as I often don't, just go dark. Go dark brown. Can never go wrong with dark brown. I don't use very much light leather on a model unless I need it for contrast. Like on the dark knoll that I just showed, all of his chest band and everything, I went light with that leather because his fur was so dark and I wanted contrast so that it would show up. So have a reason behind what you do. People who just like kind of puke like 5 different leather colors onto a model because they can aren't really thinking about color composition or whether that's going to be distracting or if it's going to clash with their other colors. So leather's a good place to put like a neutral dark brown or other neutral colors down unless you need something. Like if you're painting a Ranger in all green, then going with a reddish leather can make that green look more intense and awesome. So there should always be a process, a thought behind it. And if you're not good at colors, then just go dark brown or a neutral tan. Any shade of like brown that isn't too red or isn't too yellow or orange. Oiled leather, for example, 9110 is a very orange color of leather. And so if you put it on a model that also has oranges and yellows and like stuff like that, it'll clash because it's too close to those colors. That's cool, Coroniko. All right, I'm going to resume highlights. And I am going to also highlight more intensely at the top here. We have a pretty strong light source on this model. And so we should definitely keep that in mind as we work. And a lot of times I'm going to essentially take stuff up to a certain point and then when I get to the end of the figure, I'm going to kind of look at my lighting and I'm going to readjust, right? To make sure that the shadows and highlights are showing adequately, are reading right. So oiled leather, if you're going to use it, the best colors to put it with are green and blue and purple. So if your model's main color is green, blue, or purple, then oiled leather is a fine color to use. But remember that leather is still like, often leathers are still colors. Like, and so they can clash if they're too intense. Oiled leather, I actually don't like the oiled leather triad. I use ruddy leather a lot, but I tend not to use oiled leather because I usually don't want my leather to be that bright of an orange. I don't want it to attract attention. Usually I want my leather to disappear because it's not an important thing on the model. The exception up here, the reason I'm going red with these leather straps and making them stand out eventually a lot, is that it's part of the weapon. And that's part of the important part of the model here is, you know, the musculature and the menace of this ogre with his expression and the weapon and all of that. Like this is the point this is the area you want people to look at. So for me, I don't mind adding a bright red leather up here or a relatively bright red leather because then this is an important part of the figure. Yeah, oiled leather was always one of my least favorite leathers, which was ironic because it's always been like a Reaper bestseller as far as leather colors go. I'd say it's definitely one of the more popular colors. It's always done well, even in pro paint. And it is one of the colors that got carried over from pro paint because it was popular. Ah, lightning bolt. So I'm going to keep kind of a hard cutoff of shadow here because as this surface curves under, the light that's coming down on the top is going to go into shadow. And that shadow is still a red, but it's cooler and darker than the area on top. So as I use the stippling stroke, it's easy to kind of blend it in. I usually will just kind of blend it down on the sides because the sides of each strap kind of curl up a little bit. And that's enough of a blend for it, really, to read okay. And I'm using my tomatoey color to do this highlight. Yeah, I can hear the wind outside. My walk is not going to be fun. Should totally take sunglasses so that the bunch of grit isn't blown into my eyes. It's my only dislike of the wind around here is that since it gets so dry, when the wind starts up, it just whips everything into the air and all the grit and dirt and dust particles hit your eyeballs. All right, so that's a nice solid highlight. Tomatoes for the lose for me, Tiber. I'm allergic. Not allergic, but I have a reaction to tomatoes. I can't have them. They are poisonous to ants. So you can, more tomatoes for you. More tomatoes for you. So you can see a little bit of the work that I did to create kind of a pebbly leather texture on the back of the shield here with these colors, or something close. I'm just reinforcing this highlight back here before I bring in a lighter color. And again, I'm going to kind of drag the highlight down on the sides of the leather just to kind of suggest a blend from where I stop. Alrighty. So now let's go to our tomato plus white. Or tomato plus blonde, as the case may be. Yeah, the back of the model is definitely not as finished out in parts as the front of the model is, so thanks though. We've been working on some other really cool models as well on this stream. If you haven't been here before, we work on a different model every day and we have a rotation of 6. So this is our bronze golem that we've been working on. And I'm finishing up, I did the verdigris on the top, so I need to do the verdigris on the legs now and then do some basing. So we did him, and then tomorrow we're working on a Tiefling Warlock, which we're almost done with. I've been doing some freehand, a big fire stylized flame on the back. So we'll keep working on that tomorrow, and then we're also working on a bust right now from Reaper promotional figure from ReaperCon. Just so that I have a chance to talk about some bust techniques on this show, because usually I don't, because usually it's 28 millimeter. Okay, so you know where we are. Well then, nice to meet you, Tiber. I don't think I've seen you talk before. It's cool that you work along. It's always nice to have company when you paint. Which reminds me, I need to schedule a paint club for this Sunday. David was sick, so we weren't sure if we were gonna host, but I will put it up on the schedule. So just bringing it up a little at a time to bring up these edges. You can see them starting to come out and stand out more. And you could do this much faster and not use as many intermediary shades. I like taking my time if I'm trying to do, you know, a leather texture on a big model because you have a little bit more room to like do things like suggest cracks and stuff like that. Where if I'm going to start to suggest a crack there, I want to bring up the highlight. I'll probably grab actually a little bit of a higher highlight. So like if you're going to suggest that the leather is cracked, and if you're going to do that, then you definitely want to bring up the edges to show that that is the source of that weathering. So now that I've got this kind of faded color, I can come back with my pale orange and it won't read as embers anymore because I've cut out this bright orange. I've gone to instead this pale tomato color, and then I've gone back to this light orange. And so essentially I've circumvented the problem and made it not look like fire by washing out the middle tone. Why would this stream be done already? I am still here. Refresh. We've been having a lot of weather-related hiccups, and my internet has been freaky, just like a little freaky, not like crazy shutdown freaky. And it's probably because of the wind, actually, because every once in a while I can actually hear the wind whipping out outside. So that would be enough. Because again, I forget who said this earlier, but our lines are all above ground lines as well, so that will impact stuff. For sure. So bringing up texture and also highlights on here. I will need another highlight. I'm probably going to go up to bronze, up to blonde hair, like this pale yellow color. You could also use, obviously, tanned leather or amber gold or golden blonde or any of these light ochre-y colors. I just happen to have blonde hair next to me, so I've been reaching for it a lot. It's maybe not as ideal as some of the others because it's a little more washed out of a color, as you can see it right here, but still works. I'm going to add a little bit of orange and a little bit of a red to it to make it pale and kind of a little bit stronger. So the color I mixed by adding a little bit of my tomato color and my orange to this is kind of this, which is a kind of really pale. It's a decent leather color though. Like as far as like a raw leather, a scuffed leather. Usually leather scuffs and goes like kind of a beige or tan, light tan. Hey, Ron. Oh, I see. No, I was just showing some of the other stuff we were working on for any new people. Any new people who might not know that we actually switch back and forth between different models every day. Because we're cool that way. All right, I'm going to just stipple and kind of line, and I'm going to do it random, and I don't mind if I leave a little texture here. And the reason I don't mind if I leave a little texture here is because I want this surface to read as beat up. It's part of his weapon. He pummels people with this staff or with this stick, so it should be beat up. So I definitely want some of that to convey, and so if I'm using little dashes and dots to bring up this color, that irregularity is gonna give us that result, that suggestion. You can use various spray primers or brush-on primers on metal models. I tend to use a spray because I am impatient unless I'm planning to keep the raw metal for some reason. I don't like black primer unless I'm doing a zenith prime on it. If I'm doing zenith, I'll start with black and then I'll do an overspray of pale gray or white. If I am just priming, not doing zenith, I always use a lighter color. This is because it's much easier to get to cover black or a dark color over white than it is to get white to build up over black usually. So I tend to always go white because it's much easier for me. I'm almost always going to be using a light or a bright color somewhere on the model. So that's what I do. If I'm doing a bust or a big model, I will often do a zenith prime these days, and then I will go in with a sketch and with a pale, like a white sketch, and lighten it that way. But I do not like just black primer. I can't see details on it. It bugs the heck out of me. And also, yeah, it tends to color everything dark, which I'm not, most times I'm not wanting that on a figure. So that is me though. And it really depends on your subject matter and what you're aiming for. But yeah, Nomad Zeke is kind of right there. It's like it really depends on what you're painting. If you're doing like something that's really, really dark, but maybe just has like pale skin, then you can always put down a black primer, and then I would totally underpaint the skin white, just with regular paint or with white brush-on primer. Probably with regular paint though, because it's going to cover better. But yeah, you should think about what colors you're going to be doing before you make that primer choice, that's for sure. Because white is going to make it easier to do light and bright colors by far. But if you're trying to, and I think this is at a pretty good level, guys. If you are trying to learn lighting by using zenith, or just trying to get your shadows to go darker, then zenith priming black, and then overspraying from a single direction with white or light gray is a good tactic. And that gives you kind of the best of both worlds in a way. It will give you the black to be underneath your shadows to remind you where your shadows go and to make them darker. And it will also give you a white undercolor for your top surfaces. When you say new, do you mean Bones USA, Ron? The sculpt is always the same, Ron. Remember that. The sculpt is always the same. If there's a difference in level of detail, then it's entirely influenced by the medium, i.e. metal or styrene or PVC or whatever plastic or resin. It's entirely influenced by that. So the sculpt is always the same. I would say Bones USA is as good as resin, and resin is my preferred medium. Metal is also up there, but it is metal, so it has its own like foibles. I prefer metal to Bones Black or Bones regular though, unless it's a big model. I find that big models in regular Bones are just fine to paint. A good example is the bronze golem we've been working on. He's just regular old Bones, but he works just fine because he's a big model. So I'm using my light tomato, my light tomato color, to highlight the tops here and bring up some scuffed texture. And then I'm going to bring in my final highlight to bring that up one more level and leave it there. So that brings out all those details. The wood obviously hasn't been touched yet, so that'll be our next step, is to figure out how dark and how light we want to take this wood. I'm thinking I might bring in actually quite a dark tone to it. I might actually go in with some black and brown and really shadow it down before I highlight it up. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now, because I don't like the color it's at right now. I feel like it's feel like it's more, if I lighten it, it's going to clash with the skin too much. I feel like it needs to go darker. So that's my my call. But of course, I'm just going to paint this over with a light color so I can go back and touch it up later. Also, I tend to feel, though this is a weapon, I still tend to feel that wood doesn't need like the full gamut of like attention to it. Like the weapon itself is important, but how important is arguable. And the red is already going to attract the attention. So I don't necessarily want the wood grain to take over everything. Bones molds are steel, Eric. So they're going to last a very, 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 very long time. Made a couple of little errors there. Okay. But yeah, it's steel. So, like, you just... Yeah. But yeah, bones, all the bones are, well, okay. Bones USA I can't speak to. That's new and that's different. That's totally different. But Bones itself, and I think Bones Black, but I'm not sure. But that, I believe those molds are steel. But yeah, I can't speak to the Bones USA, and Bones USA hasn't been around very long. So. Uh-oh, I made a blurf. That's okay, because I have all my previous colors. So I can just brush it over, and it's fine. Hold on. I just saw a question, and it went by, and I only saw the tail end of it. Okay. USA Bones. Yeah, you could work with larger models to like understand the face tones a little bit better on. That's for sure. Try some of the giants, although I don't know if they're in Bones USA. That's the thing, is a lot of Bones USA right now are smaller minis. They're 28 mil. So that you won't be able to necessarily find that in Bones USA. That said, when you're a newbie, struggling with the small details is a thing, and doing those details will build your brush control. So you are going to not be perfect, and that's okay. But you should see improvement on almost any mini. I don't know if you're on my Patreon, but if you are on my Patreon, I have a video on building brush control faster that I did, gosh, I think it was back in 2019. But it gives you tips and tricks to get better brush control at a faster clip. I'm using my really pale color now, guys, to pick up the edges here and make them look scuffed. Thank you for the link to the Patreon, Quindy. I have a lot of info on there. I've been doing it for over 3 years. So right now, especially if you pick up one of the like the $10 or $15 tiers, there is a ton of information, because the higher tiers get all of the lower tiers releases as well. So a ton. It will take you a while to go through all that. Alrighty. Hello, Mike the Shiny New. How's it going? So there we've got those edges starting to get picked up and make them look really scuffed. I would recommend looking at maybe the Bones Giants. Mostly, I think, like, the queens. Like, because they have cleaner faces without facial hair. So, like, the Frost Giant Queen. Has an excellent face. And it's big. The other thing you can do, Ron, is find some busts. Like, they have things called academic busts. I think Hera Models, Hera, which is in Europe, does a number of academics. And what academic busts are is they are busts, so they are bigger, they are big. But if you want to try to master skin tones and blending and placement of highlight and shadow, they're very simple. It's usually just the skin, maybe with one item of clothing, you know, pretty simple. It keeps it really elementary, and it's fast to paint because it is so simple. And they're not as expensive because they don't have the size or the detailing. So that is another option. But yeah, otherwise with Reaper, I think the Frost Giant Queen is probably one of the best faces on a big model. Can you guys think of any others that are really good faces on larger minis? Good, Mike. Oh, good, Korniko. I'm glad. Yeah, some of those techniques should actually work to help rebuild your muscle memory. Yes. I was hoping that would be the case. I know one of those tricks, one of my friends who had some physical impairment was able to use to improve things. All right, so let's get this light color on the outside edges of the leather back here, and then let's move on to some other things. I think I did get that red, yeah, and I do want to do the strings on that canvas wrap around his arm. So again, we're using a stippling stroke, which is just little dots. And some of your dots are bigger than the others. That's actually perfect because, you know, weather does not skew. Oh, we don't allow links, Mike. The place to put, I don't know if Reaper has a not safe for work section, but otherwise I would say the Reaper Discord would be the place for that. We do not allow, we don't allow external links on our stream, just because it's distracting. And I don't have the time on stream to give feedback or anything, so. But yeah, the Reaper Discord you might be able to put up a link there. Just warn people if it's not safe for work. Just like you did here. Yeah, people have asked me if I would do critiques live, but I don't know that I don't know if that's something I'm interested in doing. I could see how it would be educational, but it does take up a lot of time and is a lot of talking and less painting. So again, you can see how that's really making those edges come up, making them look worn. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. So Ron, Crows and Bones brings up a great one. It's The Sphinx by Julie Guthrie. Do I have Sphinxy here? I do. Hold on, let me grab Sphinxy. Sphinxy! So Sphinxy is bigger. And she's in Bones, and she has big eyes and a good face. She is a monster, but but it's good practice. Ah, crap. I don't remember if it's a $2 one. That's a good question, Ron. I'm not able to look right now. Yes, I do allow a pay annually, and it gives you 10% off. I just thought that was a no-brainer when I saw it. It makes sense to give people a discount if they pay you up front. I'm trying to remember if that brush control, like it should be $2 because I try to make, when I do something that's kind of more basic, I try to make it at a lower level. And then some of the more advanced stuff at a higher. But I don't know. I don't remember. It's been a long time. It's been years. If anybody's on my Patreon and you can look it up, that would be so cool of you. I think the title of the video is Building Brush Control Faster. But yeah, the Sphinx is a really good suggestion, Crows. Thanks. All right, so then we've got those nice details, and we've got our upper surfaces being definitely lighter and brighter than our down surfaces. That's great. So let's work on this wood. Let's get this big chunk of weapon actually detailed out. We used saddle brown. I'm gonna bring it real dark. I think I'm gonna use blackened brown. I did put a wash over that, I think, also with some russet. So I think I'm going to do a mix, a 50-50 mix of saddle and russet. Because the saddle was looking a little too red next to the red leather. Just like I was talking about earlier, if you have a color that's really close to the other color, and one is more bright and one is more muted, and they're about the same light or dark value, these clash big time. So I had done a wash and to darken and add some contrast to the wood. And I think now I'm going to push the saddle brown even further away I'll still use like a couple drops of it, but I'm going to mix it with a couple drops of the russet brown. Is it a PDF? Is it a PDF? Maybe it is a PDF. Maybe it's not a video. I thought it was a video. Does it have the copper dragon? Crows and Bones? If it's Caphryxis, then it's the one I'm thinking of. Okay, I'm gonna do this 4-to-1, do that 2-to-1, and then I'm gonna mix the highlights. March 2019. Is it okay, there is a video. Good deal. Yeah. The 4-pound tier, or the $5 USD tier, is all about Master Series paint. So if you use a lot of MSP, and it's also about color theory. So if you do that, then it will be good for you. All right, so we've got this color mixed up. But if you don't use a lot of Master Series paint, then it may not give you as much utility. Okay, so I've got these two colors here, and right away I'm seeing that they're very close together. So there's definitely a difference here, but I think this one could even go, I might keep it, and I'm going to make a new mix. So this is half and half russet brown and saddle brown, by the way. So I'm going to make a new triad off here. I'm going to grab some of this. So that I want to get something that will work with these three colors. I'm going to turn my whole palette, which I seldom do, but hey. There we go. And I'm going to grab driftwood brown, I think. Either driftwood or desert sand's a little too gray. I could also use creamy ivory, but I think driftwood is where I want to be right now. MSP. Okay, cool. Thanks, D. Clearman. So yeah, it's $2 then. And it features Caphryxis, the copper dragon. And it has a video. But yeah, I was going to do another color thing. Another color theory, choosing colors thing for the $5 tier in the future. This month we may take a break from doing pentads, and I may do that copper and a mem triad. How to use, which has been a request. All right, so let's take these colors. We've got black and brown, then we've got a mixture of our original color, saddle brown, and mixed with some russet brown. And then we've got driftwood, which is more of yellow. You can see how it's much more yellow than this is. This is more reddish purplish. So hopefully that's going to pull this wood color away from the clashing color that it used to be. I do feel like I want one more drop of saddle brown in this mid-tone, so I'm going to add that. Jack, it's actually just, it's physics. So this palette is a very large palette with very small wells. So you can see one of my fingers fits pretty much in a well. So it's not a gigantic, big round well like a flower palette. I put probably 4, 5, or 6 drops of paint in each of these, but then I'm also adding quite a lot of water, usually 2 to 3 drops of water. So by the time I'm done, each of these has about, between 6 and 9 or 10 drops of fluid in it. And when you're adding water to your paint sufficiently, and when you are building essentially a deeper puddle, that means that there's a limited surface area for the water to evaporate from. So your paint stays good for a long time. I can usually paint for about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. It depends on how warm it is in my room here. But I can do 45 minutes to an hour with my paint staying at the correct consistency through it, and not having to add water. And then if I notice one gets tacky, then I just add a drop of water to all of them and remix them. And they stay good for hours. I used to do paint club at Reaper every Saturday, and for 4 hours I would sit and I wouldn't have to wash out my palette or refill it. So it's really just physics. The more paint you have in your well and the more water you add to your paint, and I'm always working, for base coats, I'm working at a 4-to-1, so that's still a significant, like 20% of that mix is water. So that's going to make the drying time slow down a lot, and usually you still get pretty good coverage. But then when it comes to like highlights, colors, or midtones, or shadows, rather, I usually go like a 2-to-1. So for 4 drops of paint, then you've got 2 big drops of water, and then you've got 33% water in your mix. And that's going to mean it's going to take a while to evaporate. And again, the deeper, smaller well really helps with that. The bigger or flatter a surface you try to use a palette of, like if I tried to use this big tray here, it's not deep enough, and there's a lot of surface area for the water to evaporate faster, and so my paint won't stay wet as long. I actually almost never use a wet palette. I've painted one model on this stream with a wet palette, and that was Troll. This is our rock troll. We did a nice base on him and everything. So he was done with a wet palette. So, I mean, I can use it, but I tend not to like it. I always joke that I'm a control freak painter. I like to have my paint at exactly the consistency I want when I want it. And the wet palette for me is frustrating because it always is making the fluid either go down into the sponge or up into the paint. And it never seems to be doing it the way I want it to do it. So I like the well because it lets me keep the paint at exactly the consistency I want for the couple hours I'll probably paint. Yeah, I did amethyst crystals on him. Yeah, when I do use a wet palette, I let it dry out. I don't keep it covered and closed for forever because I've had sponges mold in the past when I was playing with wet palettes, and that's just a letdown. So these days I get the wet palette, I use it for an evening session, and maybe I'm blocking in colors or something, and then I just let it go. I let it dry out. But yeah, it's the key thing if you're using a well and you want it to stay wet is just to add water to your paint. Like that alone will do so much. And if you are planning to work over the course of like an hour or 2, then build a bigger paint puddle. Because if you're only using 2 drops of paint and 1 drop of water, then it still will dry fairly fast, probably in 20 minutes. I mean, you still have time to work. So if you're working on one small area and you're pretty sure you're going to get it done, you don't have to worry about that. Yep, yeah, you can totally use that. We talked about that yesterday, actually, how the paper towel approach is a lot more, it's a lot easier because then you can just, pitch it. And you don't have to worry about moldy sponges. It's more discardable. Though it is still, you know, it's creating more trash, right? So that's the downside of it. So I'm going to take this black and brown, and I'm really going to add a heavy shadow to the underside of this big old club. Super big heavy shadow. Because we have a pretty dramatic light source here, so I do not need the bottom part here to be very light at all. And the end will also be in shadow because the light is coming down like that. Yeah, if you, I think the well is very useful if you're at the point in your painting career where you're struggling a bit with understanding paint consistency for different techniques. Or if you're trying to do very smooth blending on, say, the skin tone of a bust. Then having your paint consistency just right and having it stay there where you don't have to mix every brushful is very useful. So I'm going to take this black and brown, guys. I'm going to paint in these grooves on the staff. And I'm going to put in some shadows around the hand. So that's why I always tell people to do both, Jack. Like, pretty much experiment with both and see which one you prefer. I will admit that, yeah, if I only have like a few minutes to paint, like 15 or 20 minutes, then it makes more sense to have the wet palette set up than the well. And sometimes I will even just work on parchment, just dry parchment paper, if I only have like 10 minutes and I just want to block something in, just because it's easier. I've been known to do that. Just because I don't want to get the palette dirty and have to wash it again. So I'm going to make sure I reinforce my lines around the leather here too. So a little bit of a dark shadow, especially on this side. So getting a little bit more drama. Obviously that's bringing out that wood grain a little bit better. Make sure my downside here is dark. Now here, we're going to have a bit of light coming in and hitting these areas. Some of them anyway. Any that would be tilted toward the light. So I am going to darken, but then I can always go over it. Oh, that's a good tip. Yeah, distilled especially. Filtered can still get stuff in it depending on your substrate and how fresh it is. But distilled water or reverse ionized water is like super clean. Some people used to put pennies under it. I honestly just put a drop of dish soap underneath my sponge when I'm using the wet palette. And that's just fine. Plus the dish soap doesn't hurt your paint. It's just a little extra surfactant. All right, getting this in, reinforce some of this shadow here. Make sure I'm blocking in a shadow down here. Giving myself a little bit of a shadow behind the leather here. Yeah. Let's see, there we go. Now we can see that a little better. Paper plates is less ideal because it will absorb water, but if it works for you, it works for you. Usually people I hear use like a Tupperware container or plastic because it comes with a lid that's pretty tight. But if you're just gonna like paint quick, we use I would use, if I was doing it that way, I probably would use a plastic plate that I could reuse pretty much infinitely at that point. But yeah, whatever works. I mean, that's really, in all of mini painting, that's the thing, is whatever works for you, go for it. Everybody is different. in their art and what works for them and what they enjoy. So don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong. You do listen if they have like a good suggestion, like, hey, if you don't want your paint to dry fast, or if you don't want this to happen, then, try X. But, I mean, you can always just keep doing you. Boop. I can hear, like, dry leaves rustling over the roof. Yeah, it's all different painting styles. That's why that's exactly it, Crows. It's like, that's why it's useful to try everything. I mean, that's why I go back and try wet palette every once in a while. I'm like, as I get better and as my painting style changes, because it will over time. What you enjoy and the style that you enjoy is going to change over time. So as that happens, I may find new value in the wet palette, and I'm open to that. Like, always be open to considering a different thing. So I did a couple of little lines there. You can really see them on the camera. I can't actually see them that much in person. But so I'm testing out this highlight color to see if I like it. But I feel like I've got maybe a little bit too much of that dark. When you've got too much difference between your base and your highlight, then you can get a really stark highlight that doesn't look real good. Yep, ArrowWiz, exactly. And people will sometimes give you crap for it. Like, it's so funny because when I started, it was opposite. Like, the people who used wet palettes were weird, and everybody was using a well palette or a plate or a tile or something, right? But the hobby's changed a lot. But yeah, I mean, your response, if your response is it suits my style better, or I find that it suits my style better, really, nobody should be able to argue with that. Oof. I wish we had some rain. We just have wind. So I'm doing kind of a mix of my mid-tone and my highlight, and I'm kind of trying to get some of this grain. Could also just blame me, Crows. Or ArrowWiz. I blame Anne. She got me using a well. Some people feel like they can be a lot freer and more artistic with a wet palette, and I would say that is a strength of the wet palette. So, as I mentioned, don't like just dismiss it out of hand. And also, after you've gotten used to the well palette, once you have a better feel for your paint consistency, you may be able to switch back to the wet palette and get the best benefits of both, because you're no longer going to be uncomfortable or unsure in finding the right paint consistency. Thanks for trying to blow it over here from Scotland, Kerniko. Yeah, it's interesting. The first time, there have been classes, like for Sergio's class, I worked only with the wet palette. And it is very frustrating to me. It is a very, very frustrating thing. And at that point, I always have to ask myself, why am I doing this? If it's making me dislike my hobby, if it's frustrating me and making me not want to paint, then the wet palette has failed and I should go back to my well. Like, is there something that my well isn't allowing me to do? No, not really. I'm just trying something new. And if the something new doesn't work, just don't. I mean, you should always, when you enter a new thing, when you try a new thing in the hobby, you're going to run into that resistance where it's just like, ugh, this is so frustrating. So give it a try. Give it an honest try. Try to find the good things about it, the things that you might like, the things that you might steal in the future. And then, allow yourself to go back to what you enjoy, right? Because it's your hobby. At the base, at the core, whether you're trying to get better or not, you should enjoy it. And beyond that, learning new things also has value and is also really exciting and fun. But the minute it stops being fun is the minute you should take a step back. You can always come back and try that thing again when you've got a bit more experience, when you've had time to think about maybe why it didn't work for you, and maybe there's a way you can get around that. So here I've got just a bunch of very tiny lines close together. It's really hard to see those details. I'm going to need a higher highlight. We're going to need a bigger boat. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my lightest brown, and I'm going to pop it over into this well. And I'm going to add just a little bit of off-white to bring it up. Yeah, I'm not worried about wasting paint because there's so many drops in each of the bottles. So I put as much paint. I put a lot of paint. Always. But that again is me. Let's see here. It's a rare color. Like, I go through bottles of pure white and bottles of walnut and bottles of, probably brown liner pretty fast. But everything else, like, I would have to paint like 100 times with this Asmodeus Red before I ran out. That's a lot of Asmodeus Red, and chances are it's just not applicable. It'll take me a long time to run through a bottle. So I put out as much as I feel like, because I know that I've got plenty. Yeah, that's really common, Ron. That anxiety is like super, like, I totally get that still on some models. The time I get it, I usually don't, but the time that fear of screwing it up like really hits me is if the model is like limited edition. Like, I won't ever be able to get another one, and so this is the only time I have to paint it, and so the fear of screwing up is real. Screwing up or just choosing wrong and not liking it, like, that's a fear for sure. But then I won't ever paint those, and then that's kind of silly. So I got past that when I painted David's Present. That bust I was working on from Ignis Art was limited, and I only had the one copy of it, and you can't get it anymore. So I had to get past that fear of not liking it or fear of screwing it up to paint it. It's any competitors do not actually have Flow Improver in their paint, Jack. Master Series is the only paint line that I know of that has Flow Improvers added to the paint in the bottle. Unless everybody else like jumped on our bandwagon, which is totally doable, totally a thing. Like, they could have done that, and I may not be aware of it, but to my knowledge, we were the first ones who did it, and we were the only ones doing it. There are chemicals in paint that do act the way that Flow Improver acts, but they're usually at a fairly small proportion, and they don't make nearly as much of an impact as if you're adding Flow Improver separately at a higher percentage. This is Reaper. This is why I love the Reaper community. Everybody is really friendly and encouraging. They are wonderful. I guess I'm part of it, so I can say we are wonderful. But yeah, this is one of the... You have stumbled into one of the most supportive miniature painting communities on the planet, Ron. There are a lot of communities that will give you, like, if you need hard criticism, there are better communities for it, for sure. But, I mean, I would rather have a supportive community and then find a few people who can give me like, you know, give me higher level criticism if I need it. But everybody here just enjoys the hobby, and that's, I think, sometimes that's priceless. There we go. So we're getting that coming up now. I'm bringing it up with that lighter wood, and you can see that coming up there. Oh, AK is copying us, huh? Probably any perceived thinness in a paint is usually not actual flow improver declearment. It's usually just the body of the base. So they're using then a different resin, more like MSP resin. I try, Ron. I just really want to save people frustrations. So like if I can give you a tip that helps you like get through whatever is giving you trouble at the moment, I will totally do it. Because when I went out and learned, I was very much self-taught, and it was a lot harder to figure stuff out. There weren't all these YouTube videos and cool streams and stuff. So having come from that, you guys have the advantage that like there are so many good teachers, there's so many good YouTubers, there's so many good Twitch streamers, and you know there's a lot of resource out there people that will help you just out of love of the hobby, and that's something I wish to contribute to as well. So yes, I am the reason the Reaper paint line exists. Reaper community is the opposite of roast me. Yes, that's exactly right. I think that there are times when you might get some value out of the roast me mindset, but it depends on your personality. Like, I never got value out of that. I just always felt attacked. So I ended up going just to a couple of close friends for feedback who would be honest with me, but who wouldn't just slam me. Like, I think like sometimes the roast me mindset just brings out the nitpicker in everybody. And I think also that you should go into those sessions remembering that the people giving you feedback might paint very differently than you. They might have very strong opinions about how you should apply highlight and shadow, how you should use color, you know, your whole painting process. Why are you using that well palette? That's wrecking your painting, you know, etc., etc., etc. And so always be aware that when you are being critiqued, that person is critiquing you. And this goes for getting a critique from me. I'm going to critique you from my perspective. Now, I'm also usually going to tell you, this is my perspective, and other painters may paint this way. But not everybody will. So always take it with a grain of salt and try to find people who you trust who can give feedback in a way that works for you. Yeah, I don't know. Like I try very hard to support during my stream. I guess a lot of painters don't. They're just painting. And sometimes I do that also, like during my stream, my own personal stream on Saturdays. There are times when I'm just painting. I'm still explaining what I'm doing. And I still answer questions. I think it's just habit at this point. If somebody asks me a question, I'm going to stop the bus and answer it and then restart the bus. That's what I live for, Ron. Like, the people I remember, like at ReaperCon, and the things that matter to me is when people come up to me and say, I almost gave up on this hobby years ago, but then you gave me feedback and you were encouraging, and that's why I'm still in, and now look at me. Like, that's the best feedback for me. Especially when some of those people have gone on to be like freaking sculptors, you know? So that's why I do this. I do this so that you can love your hobby. Maybe someday you'll win like a medal or a prize at a painting competition, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I almost quit this hobby. But Anne told me, no way, keep going. And now look at me. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, everybody's hard on themselves, right? But we also, we're coming from within our own heads. So there can be a flaw with your work or something that you're frustrated with your work, but you can't see it. I mean, this is why I paid a professional editor to go over my first novel, okay? Because I knew there were things that she was going to see that I just could not see because I was coming from the perspective of having done it. And this is very true for feedback on miniatures, where you can think, oh, something's not working, but I can't figure out why or what. But you give it to your friend who's really good at X, and he's like, oh yeah, try this. And you do it, and it looks better, right? So outside feedback is definitely valuable, not just within your own head feedback. Now, if you don't have any other painters around you and you can't find outside feedback, the next best thing is to study styles of painters who are very different from you. Because chances are that's going to make your brain kind of, flip around and go, oh, let's look at it from this perspective, and that may help you. Yeah, internal criticism, the problem with internal criticism is that we are very harsh on ourselves. And that's not called for a lot of the time. We tend to get very down on ourselves and disheartened. And it's much more to our advantage to keep a positive mindset and to see the progress we're making. This is why even if you sell or otherwise get rid of or gift away the models you've finished, you should always keep good pictures. And then you should look back and see over time how your style is changing, how you're getting better at, X or Y or Z, some new stuff you tried that really worked. And you should use those to re-hearten yourself, to encourage yourself, and not to let yourself get so darn hard on yourself. This is your hobby. Bottom line, enjoy it. I mean, strive to be better if that gives you fulfillment, but enjoy your hobby. You will get there. Have faith. It is not a fast road. I have been painting for over 3 decades. Oh, yeah. Yeah, boo on critical family members. I feel that. I was at least lucky that even though I had a very hypercritical family member, I also had 2 really supportive family members. So I ended up okay. I ended up still self-criticism, a little bit too much self-criticism, but most of the time I can talk myself away from it. All right, so just highlighting, bringing in some little details on the wood there. Gonna come back over here. Just pretty much bringing up enough texture that I can see like this big split in the wood. Stuff like that. Bringing out details like that, bringing out details there. I'm gonna zoom out. It's very easy when you're focusing on one thing on a model to like lose perspective of the whole model. But if I look at it this way, the highlights are coming up nicely. I can see the highlights on the wood. I'll probably do one more level just based on what I'm seeing here. It's not distracting. The red still shows up much better than the wood, but the two are not clashing because I've brought the wood away from a reddish color and into this more grayed out, warmer, yellowy, beige color, and that is working. It's now no longer clashing with the wood, and that's with the red straps, and that's what I really wanted. So now I just need to continue to bring out some of the detail, and I'm good. Like one more level of highlight, probably. That's good, Kerniko. Yep, that would be it, Twisted Oma, right there. That's when you set out to do something really cool with yourself. That is going to immediately threaten all the people you know who aren't. They may not be aware of it. Most of them aren't. If they were more self-aware, maybe they would know. But it is definitely a thing. It is why people will try to bring you down when you try to do a new thing that improves yourself. And you should just like smile and nod and move on, and don't let them bring you down. Your life is yours, their life is theirs, and you should do what you want with it. I've told you guys before when I went to do this Patreon. The Patreon, which is currently my main means of financial support, and which I love, by the way. I was naysayed all over the place. I was told by people that, oh no, there's so many Patreons it'll never work. That was probably the most common refrain. You know, and there's a lot of fear about not having, you know, quote unquote, a stable job. But I felt like it was something that I wanted to do. And I didn't really buy the whole, you know, there are so many other Patreons out there, yours will never stand out thing. I feel like valuable knowledge and good teaching will always stand out. And no, I'm not like Ben Comets with $6,000, you know, dollars a month coming in, but I'm also doing pretty well for myself. I'm happy. I can improve. I still have room for improvement. And if I had not started this Patreon, what would I be doing now? I certainly wouldn't be able to stream for Reaper. I would have to have gotten, you know, a different job. A job that probably required me to go to work in the mornings. I would not be nearly this happy if I had listened to those naysayers. Like, I love where my life is at right now. Which doesn't mean I want to stay here. I definitely still want to improve things. But if I had listened to naysayers, I would not be this happy. So, don't let people put their fear on you. Yeah, it's exactly true, Joffrey. It's exactly true. If somebody doesn't like it, they can do it in their life, you know? Don't do it where you are then. And it's the same. Sometimes I do this jokingly when somebody makes a suggestion of how I should paint a figure on this or my other show, and I'm like, you can do it if you like. It's because it doesn't really appeal to me. It doesn't fit my vibe, but it might fit yours. So it's totally not a snark. It's totally a truth. Like, when I say that, is like, it just means that it's not really my vibe, and it still might be a good idea, and you still might enjoy it, so you should try it. I'm going to stick my brush in here to get this last little string. Again, we're using just straight up Asmodeus red for our beginning on these little red straps. That's nice. That brings out those straps tied around that canvas pretty well, because it's a nice dark red. I think I am going to shade it even a little bit more with the black and brown. That's funny, Cornico. He's just an ogre guard. Pendrake, he may have been one of, like, in Bones, he may have been part of a trio of ogre guards, but in Dark Heaven, he is his own individual entity. I just really like his attitude of the ogres that we have. I really just like this sculpt, so that's why I chose this one. I opened my edits yesterday, Cornico. I opened my professional edits. I was brave. And they were at once much better and much worse than I expected. Suffice to say, I will be doing a page-by-page go-through of my novel. A lot of it's just little stuff. And I don't know if there's going to be as much as I get more into the novel, because I feel like the beginning is always rougher for me. But yeah, page by page. But hey, it is it's the step, right? It's the next step. Just like I did my photo shoot yesterday to get a photograph of me that was professional for my author website. Because these days it seems like publishers want you to have your whole platform before they even take you on. So they even want you to have an author website, even if you haven't published anything, which is kind of silly, I think. But I want to be ready to self-publish if I don't have this, don't get an agent. So it's all good money spent at that point. So I'm doing a little bit of black and brown shading just to bring out these details. There are little knots and stuff. There you go. And you can see it. So I'm just bringing this up. Her feedback was really good, and a lot of it was very subtle, Kuroniko. So it's like it's exactly like what I said earlier with painting, where you've stared at the project for so long that you just don't even know how to fix it. But then somebody outside of you who maybe has a little bit of a different style or take or perspective gives you the, hey, why don't you do this here? And you're like, oh, why didn't I see that? Oh, yes. Thank you, Quindy. I was like, I was trying so hard to, like, you know, remember the law of the alpaca nation today, and I totally got totally wound up and distracted. All right, so Luca is sitting there going, oh, that Anne. She's always talking so much. So, okay, we will end here then, where I'm just kind of putting some of the little shadows around these little knots so that I can bring them out a bit. And yeah, so what we did today, we'll summarize and hand it over to Luca. Ban me, I dare you. Oh, Luca. This is a family stream. And that's not about making families. All right. What we did today. We did some red. We weathered some leather, baby. We weathered some leather, and we worked on our wood grain, and we added some more accents in. And yeah, we're slowly getting this ogre into shape. In better shape probably than a random ogre grunt ever needs to be. Ban me, I dare you. Don't mess with Quindy. Yeah, she's scary. Oh, it's going to be ogre soon. Oh, fail. All right, on that note, I'm gonna ban Luca from my stream by ending my stream. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sitting through this thing. I hope that you aren't too traumatized by Luca's stream. It's good to see you, Luca. I'll see you around. Thanks, everybody, and be back tomorrow for Tiffling action. Yay! Oh, yep. Bye.